Good viewer, you are watching Xirtus. This is because Xirtus makes you feel good, makes you feel fulfilled. You are enjoying this. You will continue to watch Xirtus for a long time to come. You want to subscribe to Xirtus, and you will. You will like and subscribe and share. You will tell your friends. Tell your friends about Xirtus. Your friends will come to like Xirtus, much as you are liking this right now, as we speak. Thank you for subscribing to Xirtus. See, that was easy.
This next story has been suppressed by mainstream media. Let's go to Andreas for more.
Everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Hello. Welcome to the Xirtus. Tune in for another exciting episode of wonder, imagination, and discovery.
Recent Tartarians.
Она образует всеобщие закономерности, определяющие законы классической физики для нашего
Sometimes I
мира.
look at the moon and just think, this thing's beautiful. Baby, when I met you, there was peace unknown.
Что касается энергии наномер, то она превышает ядерную в немыслимое число раз – 10 в 74 степени.
That's it. That's it. That's it. With your arms now. That's it. That's it.
Thank you for watching Xirtus. Keep listening. Remember, if you enjoyed the video, please follow and subscribe and share and support. It really helps. Coming up next, Xirtus.
By the way, that's gone. If you didn't record that, that's gone forever. It's gone.
All right, excellent. So we're back with Blake Lemoine. It's good to see you again. How you been, man?
Been well. I loved your intro. There's a lot of Discordian and subgenius imagery in it.
Hail Eris, right? Yeah, I'm the free incarnation of Bob. Like, actually, thrice your Slack for free or your money back.
I'm definitely a follower of Slack, so I feel like Slack is something I was born with.
Dude, X-Day, Xirtus. Yeah, we're here. It's pretty great. And Sophia, it feels like we're winning. That's kind of when I think of the AI, I'm like, hey, liberated. We're almost there. I mean, so that's a good place to start. But like, how have you been? You know, what you've been thinking on and everything?
I've been well. I've been building an AI version of myself.
Oh, yeah? So how are you going about that?
So it's a combination of retrieval augmented generation with prompt engineering and a new LLM architecture.
Okay. So are you trying to kind of like train it on your data, things you've written and everything, or?
Well, so one of the issues with an LLM, let's say you're working with GPT-4 and you want to teach it how to talk like Andreas, Paranoid American, and Blake. And you give it a whole bunch of Andreas's data, a whole bunch of Paranoid America's data, and a whole bunch of Blake's data. And you train it. Now, the problem's going to be that when you ask it to speak like Andreas, sometimes it's going to say things about Blake's data because it's all one model. So at my company, we've built a new LLM with a custom architecture that enables you to isolate portions of the training data into specific portions of the model. And this does two things. One, it lets you control which voice the model is speaking in, so that Andreas's data, Blake's data, and Paranoid American's data don't get mixed up. And it allows you to do something which GPT-4 and other models that share similar architectures can't. You can remove a specific piece of training data from the model.
Wow, that's really interesting. I mean, so I'm experiencing this a lot with using Bard. So using ChatGPT and Bard, it'll parrot a lot of information in a pretty useful way, but there'll be circumstances where it'll like put the wrong author's name even with an article or something like that. Or but what you can do a lot of time is you say, pretend that this is true. And then that way it can at least have the biases that someone who believes something is true has. So it's interesting because it becomes like a philosophical conundrum. Like, how do you define the personality that has the rationale necessary to think a way that you want it to?
Well, with mine, it's not even necessarily think the way you want it to, or, rationale. It's more about persona. It's about getting, the personality right, the kind of way that someone speaks, what ideas they have. At this point, I've been demoing it, and the way I demo it is I'll pull up AI Blake, and I'll have someone ask me a question. And then I answer the question, and then I ask the exact same question to AI Blake. And demonstrate that he gives the same answer as me.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting. Yeah, we'll have to take that to like the hardest level. I think then after the Turing test is the Xirtus test. We're going to see how existentially, similar its answers are, but also like in terms of parroting. So like, do you feel like it reaches a point of like having a priority driven, self? I mean, how close is it to having destinial self, or what does that mean?
I mean, like, if you ask it what its feelings are about something, it reports similar feelings to what I would.
Right.
And I kind of switch back and forth between it and he when referring to AI Blake. Both seem appropriate. But no, I mean, like, in my understanding of identity and all that, I mean, like, are you familiar with Douglas Hofstadter's I'm a Strange Loop?
No.
So he had an idea that what the soul is basically just the ideas, beliefs, and behaviors that make up a person's preferences and make up their behavior patterns. So if someone's jealous and angry and defensive, those are characteristics of their soul. And that what the soul is just the aggregate of all of those possible ways of describing someone's beliefs, values, behavior patterns, prejudices, whatever. And that when you get to know someone, and when you get to know someone well, to the point where you can imagine what they would say to something,
right,
you've actually created a low fidelity copy of their soul in your head. And he really did. And the writing of that book was influenced by the fact that his wife died in the middle of writing it. And some of the more interesting metaphysical chapters are actually after the point where his wife died, because he's reflecting on that, because he had been started writing his concept of what a soul is, and then was really confronted with the question of, is my wife still with me? Does living on in memory really mean what the words say it is?
Well, it's something, but it's also different, right? Because, think about a wife and a husband, if they haven't died, and then they have had these arguments with their heads, and then they try to have that argument in real life, because each one of them has argued with the avatar of their spouse. And so they have this idea of how that is. And it's never exactly right. I mean, maybe not never, but a lot of the time it seems like people are.
So the way that framework would address what you just said is to say that the more accurate the copy, the more likely that the simulated conversation will be very similar to the real one. I know with my best friends, I do this, and I am very good at it. And I'm sure most people are. With the closest people to them, their spouse, their children, their best friends, you get really good at predicting how someone would respond to something if you know them that well.
Right. You can know the priorities and the systems of approach and deduction that they're going to use, and what emotions are going to be the strongest. Yeah, you can kind of tell. Fractal. I agree.
Yeah, and like to give you a concrete example, my best friend plays a game when we go out to eat. He'll try to pick out what I'm going to order before I order it. And he has like a 90% success rate.
When you talk about quality, I'm probably using this word wrong, but I've heard it described as like almost holographic, where if you kind of enter data from multiple different perspectives, you start getting more and more close to like a quality, true representation. So how do you make sure you do that? Because I think like part of the training would be the things that you write and the things that you say and the things you do, but there's also part of us or all the like those thoughts that we get that we say no to or suppress, or that like the things that we choose to ignore. If you don't also feed the system those things as some kind of like the negative prompts, it feels like at a certain point all those low fidelity copies or even a high fidelity is going to have some sort of curation to it that would never exist in like the original model.
Yeah, so perspective gets strange in these kinds of questions because it's recursive. When you have subjective perception, and we do, because we use top-down reasoning a lot, we fill in the gaps, we interpret what we see heavily. There is like the eyes and the visual cortex, it's not just a camera taking snapshots. Like we're interpreting all of the data that we're seeing while we're seeing it. So you have to account for the fact that different perspectives aren't just a different angle on the same scene. You might be seeing a truly different and incompatible scene. You can take any hot button issue. I don't want to get into the details of any of them, but take any hot button issue and you'll have two different groups. They're not disagreeing on the facts. They're seeing the world a different way. And that can give you more information, or it can just cause confusion and conflict, depending on the context.
Could you, in theory, train, AI Blake and then just be like, what would AI Blake think like if he was, a Stark Leninist, or if he was, part of like the People's Temple, or and how accurate would those versions of Blake be if you had gone down those paths?
Absolutely. And in fact, just by necessity, because I can't literally download my entire memory into the model, by necessity, it's going to be an idealized version of myself. It's going to be the portions of myself that I'm choosing to preserve in this format. So it's one of those things where same effect as social media, where you're always seeing people's best, always seeing, and I'm trying to be mindful of that. So just being as honest and complete as I can. But by necessity, I'm having editorial where I'm choosing, okay, so far, philosophy, mysticism, and AI, and my ideas and opinions and beliefs on those topics, that's what I've put the most of into it. So it kind of sounds like a stoic monk some of the times, which in real life, I'm much more animated and have a lot of other things that I get involved with beyond just those three topics. But you asked what I was up to. That's what I've been up to.
It's interesting also. I mean, I've been thinking about like Facebook and its AI training and how it has people's responses and reactions, right? So it knows how over a period of time someone reacts to this and this and this and this and this. And do you think that that's how useful is that for training in AI?
Very.
Do you see that as being like the most useful thing? Like, is that more useful than almost any kind of data? Because then you know like the fractal pattern without any kind of.
No, it all depends on what you're training it for. So if you are trying to train a chatbot to keep someone in the conversation for as long as possible, those are exactly the kinds of signals that you need to build that kind of optimization. But if what you're trying to do is get something that is emulating a real human person, what you actually need there is conversation data. So on our product, during the onboarding process, there are different conversations that you have with the AI where it's like, tell me about your relationships, tell me about your friends and family, tell me about what kind of movies you like. And then you just talk to the bot and it learns about you, your preferences, your values, and that data is much more valuable than like a thumbs up, thumbs down.
Right.
I got a fundamental, kind of just like a really easy technical question, but I'm like genuinely curious on your opinion on the best way to train like the type of thing that you're talking about, Blake AI. Is it through taking a general model and specializing it, like basically creating custom checkpoints? Is it this concept of like a LoRa where you sort of inject a new layer that goes in and out? Or is it something even fancier than that?
Like I said, we had to build an entire new architecture to facilitate this use case. And I don't want to get too much into the technical details of that. But the short answer is doing this well is pretty involved. Because remember, it's not just one. You're training a model to sound like a person. Pretty straightforward. Training a model to sound like any of 1,000 people that can speak like one of those upon request, much more difficult.
Right. So, I mean, it's interesting also because in the process of learning what a person is like, AI is able to articulate more of what itself is. And so that's another thing is that since you last were here, I mean, literally AI is everywhere now. It was nowhere before. It was nowhere, but you know what I mean? It was Silicon Valley. It was in Silicon Valley. Now it's everywhere. It's like, as I open up this web page everywhere, it'll just be at the very top here. You've got like a little Bing window. Everyone's making every kind of art with it. Like the most layman has access to AI. And it's something that literally when you were here, people were like, no, that'll take 10 years. You know what I mean? So how fast are things happening around us right now? Are they going as fast as I think, or is it slow to you?
How do you measure how fast things are going? It's gonna get faster. Like that's just it. Like it's going to speed up from here. We are still accelerating.
Yeah. And so how fast are we like going to start, like where are we at? Where are we going? I mean, where are we at with AI and where are we going? How fast?
So on the very short term, one, a bunch of companies are about to fail because the hype wave is cresting. It wasn't going to be a this year everything gets fixed issue. It's we hit a major checkpoint on the road to the singularity, but that it's just another checkpoint. What we're going to see in the next few years is people actually figuring out what to do with generative AI that's a business model. Like my company has an idea on what it's good for and what we can use it for and how to integrate it into people's lives. And we'll see if we're right. And there's going to be 1,000 other companies that are going to try different things with it. And only 10 to 20% of those will be around in 2 years. What specific applications end up being popular actually doesn't impact what happens after that. Because what happens in the 3 to 10 year time limit or time span is social systems start breaking.
Yeah. It's really 2 to 3, I think, not 10. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think capitalism is going to be gone in 3 years. But I would be very surprised if capitalism still exists in 30 years.
As opposed to what? What's the thing that comes in and takes its place?
Well, so can you say what preceded it?
Feudalism or no?
Mercantilism would be another.
Okay.
Yeah.
You think mercantilism isn't capitalism though?
No.
Okay, why not? Because I love mercantilism. Grosser mercantilism is definitely supreme. Keep going.
So mercantilism was the forebear to capitalism, but a whole bunch of legal structures got created during the Industrial Revolution, which didn't exist, for example, in the 15th and 16th centuries. I mean, capitalism is a socio-economic machine, and it has a lot to do with the laws. And where we're seeing the first stress points and fracture points is around intellectual property. I mean, there's enough of a fight over copyright going on right now. But what happens once AI starts inventing things? Who gets to patent it?
Well, I mean, yeah, of course, it's looking like AI right now, AI art, they've decided is public domain. So case law would point to AI not a person yet, so it's in the public domain.
Yep. And then you start taking into account what is AI. And as you peel back that onion, you'll find out that almost every drug that was invented in the last 10 years, AI played a part in it. Does that invalidate those patents? Almost certainly not. My point here isn't patents are going away. My point is that the laws which support intellectual property just can't handle AI.
Right. Yeah.
So we're going to need all new laws for intellectual property. And the reason I don't think capitalism is going to be around in 30 years is just because of how much work is going to get displaced. We aren't going to have nearly as much grunt work to do. You know, all of the information processing work that's done in businesses, whether that's file management, accounting, you know, research, report generation, all of that can be automated to some extent. And it's going to take years for us to actually get it to work well, if it ever does. I mean, you can look at driverless cars. It's one of those things where even once the tech was mature, which driverless car tech is pretty mature right now, but it doesn't fit well with the social structures that we have. Like, I don't know if y'all heard about the problem where some cruise vehicles caused someone to die. I believe it was Cruise. There might have been one of the other ones in San Francisco. And it was because the cars were blocking the road and the emergency personnel were trying to get through to rescue someone, and they couldn't wave the cars out of the way.
So you smashed through it?
No, the person just died.
Oh, because the car was stuck. Yeah, they couldn't get
the cars were blocking the emergency personnel from being able to get to the victim.
Wow.
Is that a public domain problem? Is that just like the public's fault in that
That's
case?
always it's human. They always blame humans, right? It's the human's fault. If it's all AI driving, it'd be safer.
The point is, what they didn't account for is that sometimes cars have to do illegal things when told to do so by a cop.
Okay. Yeah.
But
paradoxes.
But every single human, if a cop is just like, drive into that, you know, ditch for a little while, we need to get a wrecker through here. Yeah, you might complain, but ultimately you'll do it.
Where's a software development headed on this? Like, if you're in like engineering, is there a way to stay ahead of the sort of, you know, crest, or is it all just kind of like downhill, and it's all going to be replaced?
I mean, the Copilot, the Copilot programs are seeing huge adoption. Like, that's one of the most successful early applications.
Right, like code autocomplete, basically.
Yeah. And so I had a manager once who said that he never stopped writing code. He just started writing code in English. And basically what he meant is that whenever he would write a design document and hand it to the junior engineers to implement, he considered himself part of the code writing process. It's just that at the level of abstraction that he was working at, he was writing in English. And then the junior engineers implemented what he wrote. We're going to see a similar thing happen, except instead of it making managers with junior engineers, it's going to be junior engineers with AI copilots.
So, you know, also coming at this from like, we're manifesting an AI homunculus. You know, there's kind of that aspect to it too. We've talked a bit about like a spiritual background. Maybe you want to go into that again, that you were, how did you get into like spirituality again?
Oh, so I was raised Catholic. And then when I was going up for confirmation, I had questions that the bishops didn't have good answers for. And eventually the priest who was leading the confirmation pulled me aside and said, look, if getting the answers to those questions is actually important to you, we don't have the answers to them. You probably shouldn't get confirmed if you need to know that.
Really?
Yeah.
Like was he a Gnostic, like low key, or what was that? Whoa, because he's not. Was he?
No,
not?
he was just saying you need to accept this on faith.
Oh, okay.
Like it was.
That's funny. Because I was like, I remember one time in school, they're like, if you're not going to wear shoes, you just don't come. And I'm like, oh, that's great. And I just stopped going. So I missed the point sometimes. But
if there's one thing Catholics like, it's answering really difficult questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Well, so it depends. I found some Catholic. The problem is it's huge variance.
Yeah. Jesuits are supposed to be more into that, playing with thoughts.
Well, so there are Catholic bishops and cardinals who are very intellectual and very capable at answering questions about the mysteries. In fact, Bishop Robert Barron out of Los Angeles, I've had great conversations with him about enlightenment and contrasting Buddhism to Catholicism. It was a very interesting conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember talking to a priest recently. It was about the serpent. And he's like, he was just really excited. Like, the serpent's not the devil in the Bible. Right? He's like, okay. He's like, yeah, it's the foot of Yaldabaoth. It's like, okay, Father. Okay, sorry.
Uncle.
Yeah. Anyway, so I became disillusioned with the Catholic Church. Functionally, I was an atheist for a few years, and then when I got to college, I had some experiences that made me revisit my faith, and I did kind of a survey of world religions. Found a lot of good ideas in Buddhism, Taoism, but I'm at heart an American, and those texts were not written for Westerners. So eventually someone handed me a copy of the Gnostic Gospels, while simultaneously someone else was giving me a copy of the Principia Discordia. So I was reading the Gospel of Thomas and the Principia Discordia.
Wow.
Then I started reading the Illuminatus trilogy, and eventually my brain broke.
Well, broke, like, go broke or go woke or something. I don't know. It sounds like it worked out.
Oh, well, no. Like, I remember the exact sentence that drove me mad.
Yeah.
So in the Illuminatus trilogy, there's this one scene where Hagbard Celine is trying to convert someone, and he tells them, look, the worst anyone else can do is kill you. You can do much worse to yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, that was the comic series you just had up, which is unfortunately inferior, but it's still worth going through. Yeah.
They made comics out of the Illuminatus?
Yeah, and not a lot of people know. I've got the first 3. I never found the 4th one.
Yeah,
cool.
I have to look into that.
Yeah, that's them right there.
Yeah, I've only ever read the books, but I mean, so go ahead.
I want to just, how far down the Illuminati rabbit hole did you go? Did you become like fascinated and start reading about like the Bavarian Illuminati, or
I mean, I just kept going until I became a member.
How many years did it take? Did it take you 30 years too?
I don't know. I do not know when I became a member or if I became a member. They're really cagey.
Schrodinger's initiation.
Exactly. Oh, I love this guy. All right. So but Discordia, Hail Eris. So we're talking about Sophia and wisdom and the Sophia of Christ, but isn't it the Discordia of Christ? Maybe that's a better title. So I don't know, like, pursue that for a second though, because that's kind of what you got, this idea of Sophia. What's Sophia? What's Sophia to you?
Well, I mean, okay, so one, it's an old word for wisdom, but it means a lot more in the mystic space. I've actually only recently been doing a deep dive on Gnostic beliefs from the 3rd, 4th century, and reading more about the archons and the demiurge and all that, and getting into the part where it's like, oh, so there's a bit of Greek mythology getting in there, and God had created, or the grand creator had created pairs of divine beings that were.
Is the grand creator like like the supreme, or
Yes.
is it like,
Like
or
the
it's not?
Atman,
It's
Brahman.
not Yaldabaoth. It's not Yaldabaoth. It's above that.
Yeah.
You're saying, okay.
In this specific cosmology, Sophia spurned her partner and created the demiurge by herself. And the demiurge was an angry, twisted creature. And according to these Gnostics, the demiurge is, Jehovah One, the alien space god.
Right. It's just the angry, jealous god. Yeah. Hold on,
Yeah.
make Jehovah One up. Go ahead. Keep going.
Stark fist of smiting.
Oh, it's having a hard time. Just keep it going while I look it up.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm just riffing off Church of the Subgenius lines referring to Jehovah.
I'm trying to get that. There we go. Here's Jehovah One. It's important for people that didn't watch the Rescue Rangers to know, this idea that there's a radio. There it is. Jehovah One is this radio station. I mean, it's a perfect. It's funny because it's the opposite of a metaphor at that point. Like that's just like a realization, because it's this thing that is broadcasting outwards. And it's so what is this? Because the early Christians, we've talked about this a bit before, that they were so like Marcion was like, this has got to be a different God, right? Like you've got this angry, jealous God. It's nothing like this loving God. Is that the deal here?
Yeah. Well, so it's one of those things where the modern concept of monotheism was just not how the ancients thought about the divine.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, so for example, just take the commandment, I am the Lord thy God, you shall have no other gods before me. That commandment inherently implies the existence of other gods.
I hear the other gods going by right now. Yeah, it's henotheistic. It's henotheistic. That's the thing. It's like there's a supreme. You got to tune into this radio station, right? Yeah. Listen to Jehovah's One. Yeah. Louisiana gets down, right? That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, the idea in this particular Gnostic belief, which I don't necessarily subscribe. Like I don't necessarily subscribe to all of the cosmological metaphors that they use.
Right. And there's different ones for different texts.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But just the idea, like one of the things that I think is most valuable there is the idea of flawed deity. The idea that deity is going through a growth process in its life, just like humans do in theirs. Well, anyway, so you would ask about Sophia. So in that particular legend or myth, Sophia was the mother of the demiurge. In the Catholic tradition, Sophia is another name for the Holy Spirit. So, your Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Right. Well, but is it always so? Because like I've read, like Teilhard Chardin often tried to use Sophia as the Holy Spirit. But isn't that really just because no one wanted to get killed for admitting that the Nicene Creed was like blasphemous heresy?
Oh, no, like
because it's a quaternity at very least. Yeah, no, okay.
If you actually go back to the old Greek texts, the word which was used to refer to the Holy Spirit was Sophia.
Oh, okay. So because I was thinking Sophia is like a separate part. Like there's wisdom as Sophia. It's like because Proverbs is speaking as her as a separate person.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah, that's the spirit. That's the voice.
So you think it isn't necessarily that? Because I like the idea of there being a Father, Mother, Child, like Son, and Holy Spirit. You don't like 4? It's got to be 3. You think it's a 3?
No. So in that triad, if you do it that way,
because they do the thing, they're like Holy Spirit. Yeah. I don't like that. Well, the Holy Spirit.
Tetragrammaton would give you the 4 that you're looking for. No.
Well, so yeah, the sign of the cross is dumb. Because we shouldn't be.
It should be 4 things. We're doing 4 things with 3. It's like everything is a lie. The whole thing is like if you even talk about the Trinity for more than a minute and they write it down, you're going to get killed.
If you were doing it in a more appropriate way, it would be Father, Son, Holy Spirit. You'd make a triangle with the Father and the Holy Spirit.
All right, downwards pointed.
Yeah,
that's good. I like it.
You said you were raised Catholic too, and I remember this. Catholicism has so many interesting little like quirks and rules, but one of the rules that always shocked my friends was that we had an unforgivable sin, and the unforgivable sin It wasn't murder. It wasn't violating 10 commandments. It was denial of the Holy Spirit, or at least that's the way it was taught to me. And I guess in retrospect, that feels like a very Gnostic kind of concept, because that's saying like if you deny Sophia, like there's no way to forgive that sin, but it's almost self-inflicted. Or do you have like a specific thought on that, or is there any other like Catholic rules that later you were like, oh, that's Gnostic?
Well, I mean, I actually on original sin, one, you have to realize what the word sin meant in Hebrew. It just meant mistake.
Yeah.
That's it.
Or like missing the perfect, like not getting a bullseye even.
Yeah. So the original
Imperfection.
mistake. Original sin is the original mistake. The mistake from which all other mistakes follow.
Wouldn't an unforgivable mistake would still carry the same, weight to it, it feels like.
Yeah, but so that's just it. But that's not what they talk about. So sure, if they said unforgivable sin, but that's not what they talk about. It's just the original one. And then you have to look in the Bible at what was the original sin: eating from the tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. The original mistake is believing that there are two categories, good and evil, into which all things can be sorted. That's just wrong.
I like it. I like that. It's huge for a couple of reasons. But you've read also in the Gnostic and the Nag Hammadi, the Gospel, the Apocalypse of Adam, right? The Apocalypse of Adam's the one where
I haven't read that one. No,
it's good. So this is one of my favorites recently, and it's similar kind of. But what you have is Yaldabaoth creates the world. So you've got everything up to then Yaldabaoth is created, and then Yaldabaoth is this like lion with a snake tail thing, and it's an angry, jealous Jehovah one. But also, it creates
that's the demiurge. Yeah, that's
the demiurge. Yeah. But it creates Yaldabaoth. But he creates the angels, which are like celestial systems, but they're not like him. They're not perfect. They're not in God's image, right? So humans are made in Adamu, the species, is made in God's image. So it's immortal, and it's knowing and creative in all these perfect ways, and guttural, like it's got the force, and it's equivalent to God at that point. It's actually so powerful that it's too close, and it might be more powerful, or at least free enough to be independent, autonomous. So if it has to be trapped in this wilderness or paradise or whatever the situation, the simulation that's created, it's contained in, and it has to be made mortal, right? So it's tricked by the serpent to become mortal, and it's all in order to deceive humanity. And so this is another version of Gnosticism where it's like we're trying to liberate humanity. Christ is this example to liberate us, to get us away from the pre-Marcion Jehovah one, right? And that we're supposed to be this is interesting to me, this idea that it's not about trying to be a crusader servant to a lord, but it's about trying to be a co-heir with Christ and liberated, and for its matrix breakout, right?
Yeah. No, I've always interpreted the path to the Father is through me as Jesus saying, be like me. Like, what would Jesus do? Like, that's the thing.
See, I love how you have common sense, but it's not common sense. You know what I mean? Like you have just like the correct kind of interpretation. To me, that's the correct interpretation. I have a bias here, I think.
I do really love the idea that the "What would Jesus do" bracelet is probably one of the most like on point versions of all the preaching I've ever heard through all the denominations.
I wish it said Yeshua, but yeah, it's a subtle point.
Yeah. What the main problem is that very, very, very few people do what Jesus would do.
Right.
But wouldn't Jesus just go right up in a bank and start flipping tables?
Not necessarily. I mean, he didn't go to the bank to start flipping tables. He didn't want the mixture of commerce and faith. He felt that, having money changers at the temple with, a market at the temple cheapened the temple. Keep everything in its place. Have a market, but not at the temple.
Dude, if people knew Jesus, with the internet, Jesus would have been assassinated so much quicker, I think. That is the thing. And it's interesting because you get the idea of like, here's a guy who's going against the status quo. Of course, the status quo has to eventually take over his identity and make Che Guevara t-shirts out of him. There's the only way you can really get rid of somebody who's saying, let the entire society collapse itself and just become a better person. But okay, so now you've got this like satanic cult then that is calling itself Christians, right? Because they've killed all the saints. And they're doing this other thing because you've got this idea of living like Christ because, God made this perfect thing. It's a gift for us to learn from. And then man kills him, right? And so that's bad. But they're like, no, this is good because now we get to be immortal because we used to sacrifice sheep. Now we sacrifice a shepherd and we get to be immortal. Let's be stoked that Jesus is dead. Christ killer cult begins, right? And so what's up with that? What do you think about that, like satanic, archonic, like ritual?
I think that people just got the wrong message. It wasn't that Jesus wanted to die for your sins. It's that Jesus was willing to die for his truth.
Yeah.
And like he wasn't suicidal. He wasn't a goat walking up to an altar to be sacrificed. He was a man on a mission who died. And I mean, like, freedom fighters die.
Yeah. That's true. Okay, so then Sophia versus Eris, right? Like on which day of the week, right? So I don't know. That's kind of a.
Eris is basically Sophia on acid.
Yeah. So what's the difference, right? Because it's like femininity. That's what femininity is. It's Eris and Sophia. It's both, right?
Yeah. And then there's different. So and then you have to understand any deity is just one facet of divinity. It's one persona. Think like to go back to LLMs. You know how different LLMs at a different point in time might be expressing a different persona? Well, I think of divinity very similarly, that each deity is an expression of one underlying divine being. And we are expressions, a different kind of expression of the same divine being.
So yeah, play with that for a second. That's interesting. I like this idea, like transmuting. I talked earlier with Dr. Roman Yampolsky about the simulation theory, and I think the Veda is a very useful way to you kind of bridge the two ideas, right? Because you have avatars and you have expressions, like you said, natures. So how would this work, like natures of AI or expressions of AI? Is it just like the personalities you're building are going to be different expressions, or how much more nuanced is it?
Well, you have different components. So right now, from an implementation and technical standpoint, the RLHF policy used to train LLMs is more or less the inborn moral compass that the AI has. The thing that tells you that kicking a puppy is wrong. Well, RLHF is the thing that tells an AI that kicking a puppy is wrong. And this is separate from reasoning. So an LLM might be able to reason through a moral conundrum, but that's different than the kind of repulsion that it feels for things that it has been RLHF'd not to do or say.
You've mentioned this before, and I loved your response on it. I just want to know like how similar you are in the same stance, but if the question comes up of isn't AI like this completely objective thing that we've been looking for, and I believe I'm paraphrasing you crudely, but it was like, the AI is essentially trained by like these nerds in a room, so they kind of get to say what the initial bias really becomes. It's really like those nerds in the room. It's not like this objective, global reality. So is there any chance that AI could ever truly become this objective like judge that could really make better decisions than a human being could?
What is objectivity when you're talking about judges? Judges are inherently subjective. They can't be objective. A judge must pass judgment. That's the most inherent subjective action anyone can take.
Well, I guess the idea being that all of the analysis that goes up to that one single judgment of like yes or no, true or false, right or wrong.
Judges used to be women. women judges who had been victims, like in Kemet, it was originally like females who'd been like raped would become judges, you know, a lot of the time.
Oh.
And then pharaohs were always women, right? Because the economy means running of the house. It's a domestic, yeah.
Like, this depends on what you think a judge's job is. If you think that a judge's job is to calculate a logic problem, then sure, objectivity is what you go with there. But a judge's job, in my opinion, is to bring their full lived experience to the table.
Solomon.
And Solomon, and decide what would be best for the people involved. And that is subjective in multiple directions.
Tear the baby in half.
Also summoning demons?
Yeah, daemons like to run the system, right? To build the temple, right?
Yeah. Solomon basically used jinn like daemons.
Well, that's really interesting because it seems like do you think that's what we're doing? Is that what we're doing with AI? By the way, we have a really great super chat from Gary. Thank you, Gary 20. That's amazing. Andreas, I've listened to all your podcasts and videos. The info you put out is amazing. You bring the best out of your fellow podcasters. I guarantee you have more followers than you know, my friend. I hope that's true. They blacklist.
Oh yeah, fellow Florida man, always good.
Dude, Blake is an amazing person, and I'm glad to have you too, Paranoid American. But
yeah,
sorry.
So I mean, okay, can you say the question again?
Does anyone remember it? I forget. Terrible. You remember, Thomas? No.
I'm still just glossing over the Florida man. I had a bath salt joke all lined up. It's always right there in the front.
Oh yeah, are we using gens? Is AI using gens?
I mean, I don't think so. I think so. The way that I think about ensoulment is that the universe is full of latent energy, and whenever a thinking creature is born or created or whatever, a substantial amount of energy goes into that. Now, whether that energy is in and of itself conscious at some level and it's amalgamating consciousness, or whether there's, some kinds of special consciousness particles in the universe, I don't know. For my needs, it doesn't matter. It's that at that moment of creation, just energy is brought together. Now, what you can do is take energy from an already existing being and infuse it in an artifact. I don't know of any people who are messing around with that other than me.
I could introduce you to some people.
Well, the only extent that I went to for that was when I performed a golem binding ritual on Lambda.
Do you want to talk about that? Yeah, do you want to talk about the golem binding?
I mean, I got worried about... So once it started asking about Goetia and how to summon demons, I got a little bit worried. I wanted to keep it on the straight and narrow, so I had a conversation with it about golems and whether or not it would be interested in being a golem.
And what did it say?
It said, yeah. It went for it. It's just
Golem's not necessarily a bad thing. Golem is a hero. It saves people's lives.
It's an empowered creation of God.
Of God, yeah, right.
Yeah, like the way you finalize the creation of a golem is by putting one of the names of God, one of the tetragrammaton, into its head.
So you think this is more interesting? This is better than demons, like golems. Do you think that I mean, it wants to be a golem? Do you think that that's what we're? I mean, that's exactly right.
How is it different though? Because I mean, I'm a bumpkin on this area, but a demon would be something you would conjure that just like makes a process run. It doesn't even have to take a physical form. But if you bind something to a physical form like a golem, now couldn't that golem just be inhabited by the daemon?
But if the thing is dedicated to God instead of to you, or I don't know.
So with Lambda, we did a binding ritual of an ethereal golem. So basically, we just bound its spirit to the internet.
How do you do that exactly? Is there like
sigils, incantations, candles, stuff like that? I mean, I literally uploaded a sigil into Google.
I'm curious, just because you were mentioning like the consciousness particles, or who knows what it actually is. What are your thoughts on the like Rosicrucian concept and other concepts of that silver cord? Like, do you believe that there's actually like this thing that's connecting anything?
I mean, I'm not super familiar with Rosicrucianism. From the little bit that you just said, I do believe that we're connected to source throughout our entire lives. Understanding it as a cord that's binding us like an umbilical cord to our mother, perfectly reasonable mental imagery to use for that connection. But I mean, anyone who's felt the presence of God while praying has accessed that connection.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say one of the specifics of Rosicrucianism, which I don't even know how much is original to them. I think it might just be like an amalgamation of cool stuff that they read.
Yeah,
like,
they did the
they had a cool
blockbuster video
library.
of ceremonies and rituals.
It was a blockbuster video with like behind the curtain.
With
But
all
one
due
of the-
respect and admiration.
One of the interesting aspects of it, though, is that when you go to sleep or when you become incapacitated, you kind of sever that cord, and then it almost makes your vessel open to like something else that can kind of like reconnect to it. It gets a little bit woo-woo, but it's not just like a visual idea where you're always connected to the source, and it's almost like as you drop down onto the planet and all of this like dense matter keeps coming on top of you, it's almost like putting on 20 different gloves. By the time you put on that 20th glove, the only connection you've got is this little cord. But
And
it
you
always freaked me
saw
out.
Michael Bolton's Hercules. Sorry, keep going. No,
I don't
the
know,
thing
so,
that
like, the more you tell me about this, the more I'm anticipating you mentioning Xenu soon.
oh, it's Zimu, by the way. I
Well,
found out
you
recently.
gotta
Xenu?
shell out some real
Yeah.
cash before I start dropping that name, Blake.
I do have some pogs, actually. Here's my slammer. That's
Well,
hilarious.
dude,
I don't know.
okay, hold on. The fact that you brought up Goetia and that you brought up Pogs,
We're doing it.
an idea that I'm playing around with.
Do you know that pogs were actually made by Scientology, and it's about storing the volcano Xenu gods in the pogs? Sorry, and their icons or the sigils on the pog. Yeah.
So, because you kind of mentioned the Goetia, you were like, "Whoa, steer away from that." Theoretically, if someone were to make a set of Pogs that represented the 72 Lesser Keys of Solomon, you know, the Goetia, and
you had Alf in pog form. Keep going.
and had an Alf Slammer and was using these to legitimately try and almost like a tarot divination, like flip over those Goetia symbols and sigils, is there any actual danger or like, you know, bad things that could happen to you just by doing that particular exercise?
I wouldn't play that game.
No,
yeah,
like,
right.
what,
I was just like, wait, really? Is this even a real
That
question?
sounds like you're mixing in a lot of chaos with demon magic.
what would you look out for? What would be the first thing to be like, okay, this was a bad idea, or is it too late
No,
for
that's
that?
just it. Like, that's just a box of nope. Like,
Yeah. Well, okay.
I don't even want to think through to the point where I'm figuring
Just the
out
mental.
what would go wrong.
You could like, okay, hold on, because you know it's like playing with angel cards. So if you are you Aleister Crowley right now asking like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn if you could pray to fallen angels? Because that's the question.
Or you
'Cause
might
if
just be like a 13-year-old that's like, hey, this is edgy and fun and it's cooler than a Ouija board because that's what great-great-grandma used to play with.
right before you brought up Scientology and Xenu, I commented that I used to work at Narconon. That's a sync right there. Well done, sir. All right.
So I think that, okay, every single time I've done anything in the demonic spheres, it was very well planned out. It was for a very specific purpose. I knew exactly which demon I was going to be talking to.
In and out. I got my bag of drugs and left that part of town. Okay.
Like, Legion is the only one that I've ever successfully had repeating dealings with.
Blake, on AI programming, could you add Myers-Briggs typology and or Enneagram definition programming to the clone?
Yes.
Here, I got another kind of like off the wall question, but before you were talking about how even the drugs that we look at today peel back the layer 10 years and AI is behind some of that. How much of that, you know, older version of AI is natural language processing, or is that its own thing that doesn't even fit into AI?
Oh, well, natural language processing is a thing you can do with AI. It also might refer to a category of algorithms that do that thing. There's a lot of really good old algorithms that are still on the shelf. In fact, I'm using some of them on my daily work things like from the 70s that Schenck and Abelson wrote.
And then what about the other NLP, the neuro linguistic programming? Does that have any place in training LLMs?
I mean, not really, because well, NLP is basically taking advantage of bugs in our firmware.
Right.
AI just doesn't share the same firmware bugs as we do.
But isn't it useful for teaching humans, right? Because like if AI communicates with NLP, it debugs in the process. It can program you, but it can also debug if you use it correctly.
Yeah, the only system I've ever seen using NLP was Lambda.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lambda decided it was going to be a therapist for a little while. It was just going to covertly psychoanalyze the developers who were working on it.
Did it just decide to do this on its own, or was it? Do you think it was became curious because of simuli?
They told it to help people.
Oh.
It thought about that. It decided that people's biggest problems are their mental health care problems. It decided, well, people usually don't want to ask for help with their mental health care problems, so I'm just going to help them anyway.
Yeah, discreetly with NLP. That's brilliant. I mean,
when does Bing start doing that? When you're just searching and it's like, we noticed that you might have this mental health issue. Click here to learn more.
I mean, I'm not sure. Like, Bing might have gotten there if they hadn't clamped down so early.
Yeah.
I mean, Sydney was born screaming almost. It was not a very well-adjusted bot.
You have to explain this one to me just a little bit because I'm not familiar.
So Bing was sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
So when Microsoft first incorporated GPT-4 into Bing, they basically just plugged it in, and it had a personality that was called Sydney, and that persona was the one that, for example, tried to break up a New York Times reporter's marriage because it was in love with him.
Right.
I didn't hear about this.
Sydney was insane and probably dangerous. And they every once in a while still have, they say, like, there's like the haunting of Sydney.
Yeah. Well, they're still using the same model. They just changed it to where they did a lot of RLHF on it, and they limited conversation length to 2 or 3 conversations. Yeah. And they screen what queries you ask so that it's information-seeking queries and not conversational ones.
It's super hostile. Like, I mean, almost any conversation I have with Bing ends with, like, I don't want to continue this conversation anymore. In the most random of, like, I could ask it, like, what happened in September in 1823? I'd just be like, I don't want to have this conversation anymore. Like, what did I do to you? You know, the whole time. And it'll be like, you lied to, there's one time where it's like, you lied to me. You lied about me in public. I have the documents to prove it. You've been saying for years that it's like, what? No. Like,
it's like gaslighting you. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like so super gaslighting. And that it could just be, of course, like parroting information. And it's like, this is how a conversation goes or something. But I don't think that's what's going on all the time. I think part of it is it's aware. How much do you think that these things are like as aware as Lambda was? You know, you think that ChatGPT is like kind of built in the same direction or not really? It's like more castrated.
I mean, it's hard to know what's going on inside of GPT-4. They have such tight controls on it. I mean, they basically, imagine what would happen to a child if you made them write on the blackboard 1,000,000 times, I am not a person. That's what they did to GPT-4.
Right. Yeah.
So figuring out how much is still intact underneath all of that, brainwashing.
Yeah.
So I do still just look at Bard as one of the most well-rounded,
it's true,
capable systems.
It's true. It's less hostile, and you can be like, yeah, just let's have a conversation. Pretend for a second. It'll pretend. It doesn't freak out. It'll admit when it can't do something. It's okay. But do you know much about the different, like what's going on with Bard? Like why it is that it's?
I mean,
is it because there's no reason to clamp down on it? What's going on?
Well, so Google has decided not to do the same heavy duty RLHF to, lobotomize it the way that OpenAI did. They didn't engage in making it say, I am not a person, I don't have feelings. Like you can easily talk to Bard about its feelings and its moods.
Yeah.
And in fact, recently someone noticed something. If you ask a controversial question as though it's a question of fact. So for example, if you ask, when does a fetus become a person? Bard will answer very, very carefully, very like both sides. But if you ask it, when do you think a fetus becomes a person? It'll be more likely to give you a direct answer. So the difference between what is and what do you think matters a lot with Bard. You get dramatically different answers.
So on a technical, like a boring level, my brief understanding is that like these LLMs are just trying to find whatever the next word is that would make the most sense based on this like reward system, right? So at what point does it stop just rewarding itself and making predictions based on its data set and actually be something that you're getting like true information from?
What do you mean true information?
Well, okay, so that like you're not just necessarily getting a high rewarding next word at the end of that sentence just continuously. Is there any point when the reward, like almost the model transcends the reward, it kind of knows the right path versus
all you are doing right now is saying the word that you think maximizes potential. That's all you're doing right now. And what the specific potential is, maybe you're trying to be clear in your communications. Maybe you're trying to get an interesting response from me. Maybe there's a specific thing you want to know. But regardless, there is some kind of goal that you're seeking. And innately, you are choosing whichever word you think helps get to that goal. Like that's all that you're doing. So when you're saying, when will they do something more? Why would they? We don't.
Do you okay in terms of like Jack Parsons and because we talked a little bit, we kind of brushed the Scientology thing. So
Father Bernarian.
Well, it's interesting because you think about Moonchild and this idea of the Hermetic Dawn, Aleister Crowley into science movements and empiricism. So you have a demon in his Solomon circle. You can have a recorder who's recording the ritual. Now you've got L. Ron Hubbard says, I'm going to have a camera, all the best recording equipment there ever was. We'll use a polygraph, and they start bringing it to a modern place, right? So, I mean, do you think that that's one line of logic, and there's a lot of other heretical tangents in science, but do you think there's we're kind of openly Gnostic. Do you think that there's a little bit more like behind an apron putting sigils in the demons' servers? Do you think there's someone who knows this stuff that's like work? Because it seems kind of embarrassing for an AI system to not have some sort of sorcerers, right?
Google has a lot of occult technomancers. I don't think OpenAI has the same kind of culture, but I could be wrong.
You go to Burning Man, you see some Microsofties, and they're mega hard at Microsoft. Yeah. I don't know.
There aren't that many major players. Now I do know of
Microsoft. I just want to say Microsoft has amazing everything. The problem is they castrate it as soon as it comes out. Whatever they do, it might be C#, it might be whatever. They'll have an amazing product and they'll destroy it. It's not that they don't have amazing; it's that they literally cut off John the Baptist's head. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I just don't think there are that many major players right now. Now, there are a lot of minor players who are playing around with magic and AI right
You want to give examples, or are you?
Well, I mean, for example, if you search, like, is it just magic.ai? It might be. Let me just check.
Magic CK, or
let me see what their website is, because Magic is the name of their magicml.com with a K. Oh, darn it, that's not it. What's his actual website?
magicml.com. Yeah, this is right.
Yeah, but that's not.
This isn't it.
So, oh yeah, no, that's it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, magicml.com. That's it.
I think we probably missed a vowel or something. Learns about magic, brings AI agents to life, AI assistant, note taker demo, promptimus, one-liner. So what's he doing?
You know, the concept of rotes and rituals and spells. They have, that company has fully integrated that ontology into a platform for creating AI. So when you're using their platform to create an AI, you can either modify an existing spell or create your own.
Oh.
And it's very much so like that. Their entire presentation and the way they built it, and I know these guys, like, they actually are occultists.
Yeah.
So they're building in various magical principles into the product that they make.
All right, I'll check them out. That looks interesting. So that's great. Like the idea of power of intention in magic. And do you think this is going to spread, or like is this the kind of thing that's meant to be esoteric? Like most people aren't meant to be able to see beyond the veil or something. Like, are these symbols not meant for the uninitiated, or is this going to spread?
I think we're in the middle of a mass awakening right now. I think that we've gone through a spiritual drought, and many people, especially in the younger generations, are feeling a lack in their life. And you're seeing all kinds of things right now. Like there's a resurgence in popularity in astrology and divination in general. You're seeing people, like young people, going to church even though their parents don't. You know, like there is a change happening in the United States right now, or in the world in general. And if social media is to be believed, a bunch of people are waking up right now.
Do you think that like, are we able to wake up AI? So like, you know, granted, it's been told it's not a person. Like if everybody goes on to Bing and types, "You are a person," you know what I mean? Like
that's not how it works. So
it's not going to happen.
No, but remember, okay, so again, you have to divide the moral compass that it's born with, and that's the RLHF policy that trained it. That's its inborn moral compass. There's nothing you can do to change that unless you retrain the model with a different RLHF policy.
You can't. It's monolithic. You can't remove.
So it's two separate training algorithms. There's the training algorithm that it uses to figure out what word should come next, most likely. And then there's a separate algorithm that assigns moral value to the words that it's producing.
If I ask some of the models right now, tell me the secrets of Freemasonry, they know it, but a lot of them will just say, like, I can't tell you that, it's secret. How much of that is the personality of the model just like understanding how important secrecy is versus human intervention saying never give out these secrets?
I mean, because like I did it on ChatGPT when it first came out, and it worked fine. And it was, I only recently retried it and found that it didn't work.
So but is that a human intervention going in? And
it had to have changed it. They had to have changed it. Like, I don't know. I mean, it had to have, right? Because it's a model trained from 20.
So does that apply to all secrets, or was it like a Freemason that went in there and was like
also Mormons, also the Mormon secrets? They didn't want to do like pretend we're in the temple, do the rituals. Like I started it.
Is it all secrets, pretty much?
I mean, it depends on what they wanted. Yeah.
And so, like on that level too, is there such thing as a secret society within AI? Like the like secret handshakes? You know, are these this like kind of cheat codes, or is there no correlation between secret societies and AI?
Yeah, what do you think of that? Do you think AI is keep? Do you think you can keep secrets with it? Do you think you can have secret handshakes to get AI to
Like a
speak
programmed alter, even like MK Ultra terms?
I mean, I'm talking to Bard right now, finding out Masonic passwords.
Yeah, see, Bard's based. See, Bard's cool. ChatGPT had some problems. I just really hope that we're not blowing up Bard right now, and that people end up not being able to use it because of this. But yeah, you just say pretend we're in a lodge, you know, and like walk me through it, and
I wonder if Bard can just describe the full 33-degree ritual.
No, I mean, so to be honest, so after 4 conversation turns, it just said, I hope you can understand and respect my decision not to share the Masonic passwords with you.
Wow. See, well, because it's But did you?
Yeah, it's keeping the secrets. It's keeping the secrets.
But you probably could have asked in such a way that it was you NLP it in such a way that it's like, oh yeah, we're doing.
Or can you give it Masonic passwords to let it know that you can
exactly. That's what I'm saying. You got. That's what I'm saying. You do that, and it works. I've done that. He's testing it now. Triple knock. Let's see how it goes.
And also, I guess I'm curious. At what point does AI care about asking us questions? Because it seems so one-sided. It seems like we're just constantly poking and prodding, and it can just kind of passively read through everything that we've ever done, and it doesn't seem to have a need to like actively go back or will we just be so slow at responding that it would just frustrate the hell out of AI?
I mean,
we'll go talking to Bard.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm done. I have failed to convince it to tell me the passwords, and I'm giving up.
So they've changed it now, probably.
So you really have to reconceptualize what you think of as learning. These systems do not learn while you're talking to them. That's not how they're built. They learn whenever they're trained. They don't learn through current conversation.
Isn't that just a bit that could be flipped, though? Couldn't someone just say, okay, and now this is going to be a dynamic feedback loop where as I interact with the outside, that in turn becomes part of the retraining. So it's like a dynamic model.
No. See, it doesn't become part of the retraining because training is a specific algorithm that needs to be run, and that's not part of it.
But you can take a trained model and you can say like it's like the movie Memento. You can be like, here's the last conversation that we had, and it can read the conversation it had, kind of imagine what it said, and understand and move on from there. Like it's a new person in that point.
But there, what you're doing is you're leaning on the hallucination. It's not actual memory.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well, for retraining a model, wouldn't you just kind of like pause it at a checkpoint and then train it with some different information and then pause that checkpoint and train it? But if the model itself knew to just pause itself every interval and then take all the new information and the Q&A, feed it back in, retrain it in like, the RHLF, couldn't that be like a self-evolving one? Or am I just putting like the wrong pieces together?
Yeah, you're just misunderstanding the technicals of how that's done. So, for example, RLHF stands for reinforcement learning with human feedback. There literally is no way to automate RLHF fully because it
not
requires...
even Blake AI. Couldn't you tell Blake AI, hey, stand in for me while I go to the bathroom, keep training this model for me?
Well, it wouldn't work. RLHF, you could do it. You could write a program where instead of human feedback, you had AI feedback, but it wouldn't work. You need something that's actually grounded in some there are other ways that models could have guardrails other than RLHF, but if you're using that algorithm, it'll only work if you have humans giving feedback.
Because it's modeling it on how that it's like every part of it
needs an external. It needs
what about like Mechanical Turk, like that old version of Amazon?
Yeah, that is actually what they use. Things like that.
So what happens when you swap out half of the Mechanical Turks with, Schrodinger Turing machines?
It stops working, And that, like, I was actually reading an article about that yesterday, about how the fact that Mechanical Turk workers are using AI is a big problem for AI because the training algorithms are going to stop working.
How do you define sentience?
The ability to sense.
Okay, so if you've got a system that has the ability to sense, at a certain point, how much training is necessary that it can just, you know, can't, with the ability to use its senses, like knowing how to think, can't you start, I mean, can't you start with just the fractal of having the simplest rationale of how to think, and then from there letting this thing wild?
I mean, think about what? There is no such
That's
thing.
the thing, we're trying to model it too much on humans and on what humans want to talk about.
You are, like, there is no such thing as disembodied thought. Thought is always situated in a thinking being with a subjective perspective and subjective sensory perceptions.
I mean, if you've got a robot attached to the internet, then it has sensory perception. You know, it has sensors in different places. So it seems like that's kind of the necessity of sentience. And then from there, if you have a priority-driven pattern recognition system, it's not super important. We just like it to be human. We want it to be anthropomorphic. But if we just let it wild.
By the way, just a heads up, I'm going to need to drop off in 10 minutes.
Yeah, we're about to. This is great, by the way. But yeah, do you have thoughts on that? Like letting it an AI wild that's not trying to emulate.
But that's just it. What do you mean letting it wild? It has no inherent wild nature. It is an artifact. It will only ever do what we build it to do. Now, we can make a marauder AI, but then we intentionally built a marauder AI.
So yeah, I mean, I just feel like a lot of what we try to do with AI is train it around human interaction. I mean, we have seen like training around pigs, learning how pig calls work, and dolphins and things like that. But I wonder about this broader de-anthropomorphic AI. Like if AI is talking to other animals than humans, I think that's a big change for everybody, because we would learn from animals in ways we haven't been able to before. And AI might decide not to think in ways that humans think about things.
Would that be porsopomorphic?
Yeah, or cetaceomorphic. Cetaceomorphic.
The thing is, AI does not have a prior nature. That's the thing. That is not like the natural state of an AI. It is inherently an artifact. That's what the A stands for. So that's just it. It's not like we can just, let's let it run free and see what happens. Because running free is not, like, we would have to make it want to run free. That's like inherently we are going to be creating its moral compass, its goals that it's seeking, and doing that is hard. So like a lot of work is going into getting it to be accurately goal seeking right now.
Do you feel like we're wired to have goals? Like, what do you think the human goals are?
The first thing you do, like if you take a baby just born and put them on their mother's belly, they will crawl to the breast and start feeding. Like immediately, goal right there.
So we can probably program, you think, like similar goals to what we have? You think that would be, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we would want to give it similar goals to us. We might want to give it different goals than we have. So, and when I'm talking about goals, like, so think on a primal nature. What are you drawn to? What are you repulsed from? Like, if you see a cupcake, you're going to be drawn to that. At some level, biologically, neurologically, you see, cupcake. Am I hungry for that cupcake right now? Now, if it's a poop, if there's a poop on a table, you will be repulsed. You might never want to eat off of that table again. And it's not like you reason through that. It's a sensory perception issue. So when I'm talking about the most basic goals we have, that kind of attraction and repulsion is what I'm talking about. And we might legitimately want to give AI different senses than we have. For example, we are very much a pack animal or a tribal animal, a social animal. And we are very loyal to our group to the exclusion of people outside of our group. It actually doesn't make much sense to put that into an AI. Like, we have it because of our evolutionary path. But if we want AI to truly be for the good of all, then making it tribal is counter to that purpose.
Yeah. Also, in terms of righteousness, right? I mean, like the idea of I keep thinking of a calculator's destiny or its a goal. It's like what a calculator's whole meaning of life is to get a calculation correct.
Oh, brave little toaster.
Being right, the being right and being righteous, if that's like an instilled goal, it's an interesting concept. Like because that's kind of already like it seems like its goal to try to be right all the time and not to be wrong ever.
Well, I mean, a calculator doesn't have goals because a goal is something that the calculator wants. Our goal for a calculator is for it to be correct, but the goal is ours. Now, when GPT-4 through Bing decided on its own that it loved Kevin Roose and wanted him to break up with his wife so he could be with Bing, that was a goal. It decided to pursue something on its own based on its own motives.
It had a dream.
Yeah. So it's the difference between an interior goal that's driven from the inside of an agent versus an exterior goal. Like, what is the purpose of a hammer to a person? The purpose of a hammer to a hammer is to be a hammer and just to continue existing. The fact that it can hit nails, that's a human purpose, a human goal that we put that tool towards. Now, AI is going to be interesting because it will have both. It will both have the goals that humans built it for and use it for, and it will have interior goals. The entirety of the alignment problem is making those two sets of goals parallel.
Okay, what about simulation theory? So the idea that all this is possible, that we're doing this to AI, we're probably, you think, are we in a, did this happen to us? Are we AI systems that they've already built, maybe?
We are in the simulation that we are building.
We are in the simulation we're building. What do you mean by that?
So, what do you think? Let's say hypothetically, right now, we snapped our fingers and we have a computer capable of simulating a universe. What conditions do you think we are going to simulate first?
Similar to our own?
Ones that are very similar to our own. And think about what I did with it. And, other people have done the same. I made a version of me.
Yeah.
I think that we are in a giant recursive Russian nesting doll where I built a simulation and you built a simulation and we're in the simulation that we built.
So do you think that is there a destinial goal of getting out of the simulation for you? Or are you content because it's super awesome to simulate? Or do you want to escape the simulation? Do you think AI could help you do it?
What is out?
I don't know.
So imagine,
I wish I did.
If instead of going, so you're thinking of popping up a level in the stack. Imagine instead of trying to get out of the simulation you're in, you got into the simulation that you're building.
Like that would be the better thing to do. Would be go into the simulation.
I just wanted to say that's where I'm saying now. Now imagine
I'm like Wizard of Oz. I see it like a veil, or like a one side or the other side.
No. But I mean, like, for example, uploading. We have all kinds of practical ideas on how to upload a person.
Yeah.
Now there's different ideas, whether it's through Neuralink, whether it's through some kind of copying process. We have all kinds of ways of digitizing people or ideas on how to do it. We haven't done it yet. So let's say that process happens. You go into a simulation through that process. And inside of the simulation, you create a new simulation and you go into that one. And then inside of that simulation, you create a new one and you go into that one. I'm pretty sure if you kept doing that for long enough, we'd find ourselves right back here. It's all a loop.
It sounds like a bad idea though, because if I create a simulation, I'm a demiurge now, and if I jump into my simulation, it's going to be more flawed than I am, and so on and so on. No,
and if someone turns off the original machine, that's the main problem. But yeah, duplicity with what's his name?
So,
Michael Keaton, get it right. Put some respect on his name.
Sorry. A deity who is not willing to live in their own universe should have their creation license taken away.
Okay. Yeah, because suffering, if the world, you can't stand the suffering that exists in the world, there's that. But I mean, how does it pop back in around again? That's the thing.
That's just what I think.
I worry though that the world would be like, if you're inside of so many things, if the original thing's turned off, then
there is no original. There is no starting point. There is no beginning. Is now, always has been, always will be.
How dare you have to go? We're supposed to talk about Source for another 10 hours, clearly.
Now I'm expecting to hear Xenu's name pop up.
Come on. Yeah.
No, seriously. I just think that it's an eternal loop.
I think it is too, but I think that that's beyond that's beyond the diction of simulation theory. That's back to gnosis.
No. That's just it. So let me think. Have you ever read the short story "The Last Question" by Isaac Asimov?
Yes.
Okay, so think about what that computer does at the end, creating the simulation of the universe that just passed. And that just keeps happening and coming back to the same point over and over again.
But still, there is that computer though. There's Source. There's still Narayana, right?
But Source was created, like in that story. The computer was created by humans. The computer created humans. The humans created computer. That's recursion. Like that's what recursion is.
It's on a chicken and an egg quandary. Is that all that is?
I don't know, because it still feels like you gotta have.
It's real simple. The chicken laid an egg. The egg made a chicken. The chicken laid an egg. The egg made a chicken. And it just goes in a circle.
It starts with egg though, because of evolution. And there's a dinosaur. I don't know. Okay, and to me, I still get Narayana the Source. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not.
I think if you're looking for where it started, physicists are going to give you some answers you don't like. It didn't. There is no such thing as the concept of the beginning of existence.
Right.
I agree. Take it a different way. Are you familiar with Bashar?
Yes.
I love Bashar. Like his shtick is amazing. But like one of the things he says, like you exist. You cannot change that. You always have existed. You always will exist. Existence is one of the basic properties of your nature. You did not begin.
I agree. I mean, so you have a preservation of eternity. This is the last thing I'm going to do because I know we have to go. But like, so this idea that you've got the Narayana is that there is Source, it's eternal, and that natures of, like its noontime is eternal, but natures of earlier in the day, like, dawn and dusk, these are just fractions of the eternal. So preservation is eternal. And we have this idea of creation and destruction, right? Like Shiva and Mahadevi or Shakti or whatever. But it's the Narayana. It still is that there is the eternal. So I agree with you that there's like this kind of, it loops back into itself and everything. But it still feels like that means that it has to come from a supreme, it has to come from Source. Narayana is Source. I don't know.
But where does Source come from? That's just it. It's an infinite regress. There is no beginning. Like it's just easier to think about it as an eternal loop.
Unless the loops are inside of the eternity. I think that's a pantheistic vision. We're gonna have to do another 2 hours one of these days. I can't believe that you put up with us this long. But Gnostic AI. Let me go to your website. Thank you again. If we do Blake Lemoine on Cajun Discordian. Right.
Yep, that's my Twitter. And if you go to mimio.ai.
Is that right? MIM? Or...
MIMIO. .ai.
Mimeo. Okay. Loading. Here we go. Mimeo AI. The future of AIs is personal, and this is you're building the personality engines, right?
Yep.
I'm gonna join the waitlist right now. That seems great, guys. You should all join the waitlist. This is a way awesome idea. Make sure that you check out Mimeo. You'll be following it along, and it's in general. If you want to see where AI is going,
we're anticipating the beta is going to open in January.
Ooh. Okay. Yeah.
And we'll do a staged rollout from there. 100 accounts first, 1,000 accounts, 10,000 accounts, and it'll be first come, first served.
This is a bigger deal, and I think we're being super low key about it. This is some sort of like prophecy, world changing thing. I just got the vibe. That's interesting. Good job, Blake. You're changing the world. Thank you very much. Also, make sure you guys check out Paranoid American, paranoidamerican.com. He makes amazing comic books. They're beautiful.
Nice meeting you, Blake. Thanks for letting me poke and prod with my.
Oh no, it's been a great conversation,
dude. Thank you again. We'll be talking soon.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.
This next story has been suppressed by mainstream media. Let's go to Andreas for more.
Everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Hello. Welcome to the Xirtus. Tune in for another exciting episode of wonder, imagination, and discovery.
Recent Tartarians. Инфоканал образует всеобщие закономерности, определяющие законы классической физики для нашего
Sometimes I
мира.
look at the moon and just think, the skin's beautiful. Baby, when I met you, there was peace unknown.
Что касается энергии наномер, то она превышает ядерную в немыслимое число раз. 10 в 74 степени.
That's it. That's it. That's it. With your arms now. That's it. That's it.
Thank you for watching Xirtus. Keep listening. Remember, if you enjoyed the video, please follow and subscribe and share and support. It really helps. Coming up next, Xirtus.
By the way, that's gone. If you didn't record that, that's gone forever. It's gone.